Okay, I tried to fix my profile picture on YouTube to change from that meme.
Yeah. All right.
But the picture...
So, good.
Yeah, the picture would always be upside down or sideways, and that really pissed me off.
Yeah. All right. So, as I'm looking
Thankfully,
at the Twitter
Twitter's not a
chat,
little bitch.
yeah, with Owen and Ham going at it, it's fucking hilarious.
Wait, they're going at it? I thought they would agree on something. I guess that just means Ham likes to fight with everybody, even the people that he sides with.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's Cult of Ham. I mean, are you really shocked?
Not
Like,
really.
really?
Not really.
He argues
But
with
it's just...
everybody under the goddamn sun.
He'd argue with me even if I said that religion was stupid.
Anyway, I mean, it's gonna be the new Cult of Ham and Humane Mind thing, except you just remove Humane and you place in Owen. And basically, it's Owen. I mean, it's Humane if Humane didn't have facial hair, was bald, and had a snaggletooth.
True.
Either way, I honestly don't really care if they join or not, but it would be kind of funny to see them two just spar at it and be like, capitalism's the worst. And be like, no, capitalism's not the worst. It'd be funny. It would be really funny. Either way,
but I thought you said capitalism was the worst. Shut up.
Yeah. Either way, I mean, I think it would be fucking hilarious, just to see the two go at it, and because Ham's on the left, and Owen is like so left wing, he makes Karl Marx look like a neoliberal capitalist. Yeah.
By the way, I'm gonna have Zach. I was gonna have Zach make a picture for me.
Oh, that's gonna be cool. It's gonna be the one with the Danny Quartz rant where you're all just spread out across the thumbnail. It's fucking hilarious.
Actually, no, it's the same picture as my Twitter.
Ah.
He said it was probably going to take a week, which, I mean, that makes sense. Seriously, someone else needs to join here because I'm starting to get a little bored.
And we can talk about what's in the Twitter chat because apparently, okay. So Owen says possibly he might join, and then Cult of Ham drops an ad hom, which imagine my fucking shock that he'll be like, "You libertarian tards." I mean, I think the Libertarian Party is better than the Republican and Democratic Party, to be honest. That is a fucking awesome profile picture on Twitter, and yeah. Oh, and your boy Pat is following you. Cool. I mean, to be honest with you, if I could run for president of the United States, I'd probably run as a Republican. But like the minute I get the election, like the moment I'm about to be elected, like as soon as I could, I would switch parties so fucking fast, and they'll be like, "Oh shit," and they can't do nothing. Second term though, so essentially, and but like I was a libertarian the whole time, and they're like, "Fuck." and they can't do nothing. And hashtag S-Man did nothing wrong will be part of my the farewell address, the farewell speech or address.
I had no idea if I'd run as Democrat or Republican.
I get the vibe from you
because I agree with a lot of Republican views, but Democratic views is like I agree with some of them as well.
I take the fiscal conservatism and the social liberalism. So and that's kind of what the Libertarian Party. It's like imagine if a liberal Democrat and a conservative Republican hate fucked and had a love child. That's essentially the Libertarian Party is what the result is. And and JJ, because you said you'd read a fan fiction about Zach and Google it. Imagine that kind of fan fiction. That'd be funny as hell.
Yeah, sure. I can't believe I actually did say that.
I can't believe what happened in the chat at the time happened in the chat.
It's like, no, I don't want to hear any of that shit. No, wait, that was the one where I said it would be between Blair White, Riley J. Dennis, and Roaming Millennial. I should really get on that fanfiction just to trigger Zach.
And then record yourself reading it out, and then send it to me, and then it'd be like a guest video. It'd be funny as hell.
Yeah, I just need to find someone to help me write it, and I'd make it extremely graphic so that Zach would possibly throw up after seeing it.
And when he has his next strike force, we just post a link to the video in the chat, and he'll do a live reaction, and he'll just he'll be like, no,
make him throw up on stream.
He'll be like, no.
That is not what I want to hear.
All right. Hang on a second. Let me. I'm just gonna. Okay, so Elite Gamer wants to get the link. Let me go to his Twitter.
At least someone joined, but he's muted at this point.
Who is it?
Owen.
Oh, hello. I've not spoken to the guy in a long time. I hope he's doing okay.
Yeah, same. He doesn't seem to be here, or he's just gonna stay muted. I don't know.
Yeah, either way, he's okay. It's okay to be muted. But let me go to my Twitter messages because holy hell, a lot of people have messaged me. Either way. I don't know if he's having mic problems or what the deal is, but either way, he can chill or he can tell us about whatever.
Yeah.
Got the link, and now I've sent the link to him. Not to Owen, to Gamer Godric. So, and Colt the Ham posts a racial slur in the live chat, which it's Colt the Ham, so why the hell am I surprised?
I mean, he's a leftist and he does that, so just wow.
Yeah. I'm trying
to me, racial slurs aren't that bad. It's just words, and plus, if I ever say them, I don't actually mean them. I believe everyone is born equally.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
What's up?
I mean,
What's up, Godric?
I've been called all sorts of racial slurs throughout my childhood. Like, the first one I can remember, I was called a spick, and I was like, what in the hell is that? That's just... I don't know why you'd want to call somebody that, but, I mean, I think it says more about you than it does the person you're insulting, but I don't condone... Yeah. If someone calls my friend a racial slur, I'll just tell the person to get lost.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I've been doing nothing at all today except for downloading role-playing games, which I plan on doing for live Twitch streams. I told Joseph, man, I moved on from YouTube gaming to Twitch gaming because, well, anything I throw at gaming at YouTube is just being unfair. It's either being blocked or what's the other thing that's going on with YouTube gaming these days?
Oh wait, okay. Owen just left a message. He says, "Just finding a working set of earphones. Give me a minute." Okay, no problem. All right.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can hear.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Let me turn you up a little bit. All right.
Sorry if you guys hear sound in the background. My nieces and my sister are here.
All right. So Owen, I haven't spoken to you in a minute. So how you doing, man?
Tired, to be honest. I mean, I was streaming with a few people.
Oh yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I got the notification. I just haven't had the chance to see it. I hope you had fun. And congrats on 400 subscribers, man. I'm getting close there myself. So.
Thank you. And,
Yeah, congrats, man.
You'll be there as well. Yeah, thanks to all of you. I can't say I'll be here for too long because
I'm not
exhausted. But
yeah,
if you're all going to be chatting about politics and stuff, then I might as well sit in for a bit.
Yeah, I don't mind chatting with you on that. Essentially, I don't know if you've seen the debate, or I'm going to doubt it. I doubt you've seen it, but between
Owen let me correct myself. The debate between Cult of Ham. Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that newest debate.
Yeah. Well, I'm referring to Owen in this instance. I don't know if you've seen the debate where some random geek. It was his first debate, and I applaud him for that. He debated with Colt Ham against me and Zach, who's now known as the Dark Conservatarian, and it was about the ethics of private property rights and the right to discriminate. So, if Owen said to me, "S-man, because I don't know, you're probably way more than me. I don't want to serve you. Get out of my sight." Essentially, the argument was that I could go somewhere else and I could just avoid Owen's shop, and there's literally no harm being done. And I could have also used the analogy of if my restaurant was not a worker-owned vegan restaurant, Owen could take his money somewhere else and spend it on a more left-wing, anti-capitalist, anarchist type business, and that's totally fine. You know, that was kind of the whole point, and Ham cut me off a few times, so I kind of shared Owen's pain with Ian Conway cutting you off so many times. That debate, I don't know how you made it more than 10 minutes.
It's the only debate that I've actually ended early, I think, because
there was Aspies, and that debate, honestly, I was shocked it wasn't on capitalism. I was wanting it to be on capitalism, but I mean, it's whatever topic that Aspie and you disagree with.
Well, I mean, at least we sort of hashed out our points, though. Like with Ian, I think there was a lot more to be said, but it was just like Ian was. I don't know what you even said in the video, but I'm not. My debate's just I yell over people. It's like, well, when you got that sort of crowd, it's no surprise he was how he was.
Yeah. And with the control room, you could hide the guy from the broadcast, and I don't think you can hear him when you do so, but you can return him to the broadcast. That's what I would have done. With Ham, I had to mute him like only once. I mean, Jossman was moderating, but I just got so fed up. Like, I don't normally cuss at my opponents, but if you cut me off repeatedly, I kind of pull a war corpse a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's understandable.
Yeah.
If Jossman was moderating, why wasn't he the sort of person in charge of the admin and stuff?
He asked if he could mod the chat, and he was the live chat, and the issue was like I just muted the guy. I was the quicker one to the control room. I shared it with him.
Okay.
Yeah, and I remember initially when I had that second debate with Lavelle Robinson, you commented on it. I did initially suggest you as a moderator, but I'm like, he's probably had enough of hearing from me for a while, so you probably would have had to mute the guy like 50 times or something, and then you probably would have just ejected the guy. So I'm like, I don't want to subject Owen to that type of pain, and now he's been through Ian with it, and I don't. It was weird that he was a capitalist or something, because he did seem to have he took umbrage with some things Humane was saying, and I mean, I saw about an hour of the debate, and there were some points I initially from Humane I could agree with. There were some points of yours I took umbrage with, but it was like not at like, oh my god, I'm going to tweet you a question like, what did you mean by this or anything. But I will have to say one of my favorite debates of yours was our first one, because that was my first one. I mean, should have had some headphones, but then again, I was like not a pro at this at all. I mean, I'm still not to this day, but you know. And you know, overall, it's like these debates since the first one inspired me to want to confront ideas, and there's a few topics I refuse to debate, like people wanting a white ethno state. I wouldn't be doing what Andy Worski's doing. The ethics of punching Nazis is so far the only debate I've changed my mind on. It kind of actually, I felt disgusted for holding the position that we shouldn't punch Nazis. I mean, before anyone calls me a leftist social justice warrior, I mean, that's just an ad hominem and just a pejorative that means nothing today. I mean, I will just say this. If Owen were to run up to a Nazi and punch him in the face, I would not publicly condemn nor praise him, but I would say that, if you're dressed like a Nazi in public, you have to be like expecting some type of negative reaction, And
I mean,
yeah,
it's sort of a thing where, like, with violence, like it shouldn't be a thing, but you can still condone it when it's against people like that. Like, imagine if you knew that someone with a view of like, the Jews are bad, black people are bad, all those things. Like, if that's in society, then you want to be opposing it. And whilst no one's saying, we should make violence legal and you should just be able to attack people. What people are saying is when groups organize against fascists and against Nazis, they should be, encouraged. They should be condoned.
Yeah, and essentially, I mean, with Antifa itself, it's like I totally get their point. It's just I feel like sometimes their actions and I wouldn't say outbursts, but you get the idea. I feel like sometimes they're a bit misdirected. Like vandalizing public property, I think is unacceptable, as you're punishing other people who had nothing to do with what you're protesting are getting punished for it. Like, I'm totally fine with peaceful protesting, and I was annoyed by people who were like, these football players taking a knee. I mean, I personally thought it was pointless, and you having to explain what your protest is about kind of shows your method of protesting is bad. But I think those football players were exercising their First Amendment right to protest, and even though I didn't agree with how they went about it, the fact they were peaceful, I applaud that. And with any protest that calls for the deaths of anybody, that type of protesting I think is ultimately harmful and counterproductive. Like, if you're protesting capitalism and you say we're going to hang capitalists by piano wires, going to help you, and it's going to seem barbaric and everything. I mean,
because violence is hardly ever the answer.
I mean, it is the answer.
Violence should be. Let me see if I'm saying this right. Violence should not be a way of justifying. And then I had my head from actions.
It's justified in the sense, for instance, when Pearl Harbor happened, we were trying to stay away from World War II. And as a result of Pearl Harbor, it was all right. We've just been attacked. We were staying out of it. That's it. We're drawing the line. I didn't find that same justification to be present in the invasion of Iraq, which by then President George W. Bush. I've seen you post on Twitter about, like, people ask you if you could speak this former president or current president, what would you say? With Jimmy Carter. He seemed to be way more diplomatic than the next few presidents. So
he's still engaged in foreign policy. And Godric, to come back to something you said a second ago about violence, whilst if it's like personal to personal, then obviously it's not right. But sometimes you got to recognize that systems and systematic problems do require immediate actions. And when you've got a far right, which is vocally present, clearly on the street, there's clearly efforts to move it forward, as we saw with if you even just looking at Andy Worski's stream, like the state of the chat in that stream was horrendous.
Absolutely.
Like, exactly, and those people do exist, and they've got a lot of popularity. So, in my opinion, if you can prevent and oppose further far-right growth by, physically treating them like with violence, then that's a plus.
I do have a question for you. This is a question that it's been in my head for a long time whenever you use the term far-right. And Humane Mind and I had an entire discussion about this topic. Is the issue with using the term far-left or far-right? When I first met you and had a stream with you, I thought you were on the authoritarian left, which I mean, with some of the views you've stated, I don't buy that at all. anymore. But I'd say that I would personally define far right is like more economic in the economic sense, like economically right wing, because some of the people that are defined as far right by some are, I wouldn't say center right at all, like they're more moderately right wing in the economic sense, but they tend to be more on the social ladder. They tend to be more hardcore authoritarian. For instance, United States neoconservatives with the dedication to high military spending and spreading national values, they tend to be more authoritarian than hard right, and neoliberals, from what I've experienced, tend to be more in the economic scale, more right wing, but way less authoritarian.
I mean,
From what I've
I'm personally like not a massive fan of the. I'm assuming you're referring to like the political axes, which is like you've got left wing, right wing, but then you also got authoritarian and the other one, libertarian. Yeah. I find it a little bit it's not as accurate as it could be. Like it's sort of those sort of tests are naturally geared to make you more libertarian, which is obviously like looking at the questions that are asked on that test. It's understandable because
I'm not.
You get like sorry, what were you going to say?
I wasn't like referring to the political compass test. It's just in general with people who say things like far right. It's just from how I've experienced people and their political stances and speeches. Like some things seem very authoritarian or not as authoritarian. Like for instance, people would say that that Hillary Clinton was more right wing economically than Barack Obama, but they're both end up on the authoritarian right. Like I think on some issues they both would probably lean a little left, but they weren't on the left themselves. But I'm not like referring to the tests, like the political compass test, like that. I have a problem with. Go ahead.
Well, firstly, before I say anything, hello, Lonely Wolf. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Oh, let me turn up his volume a little bit. All right. Go ahead, Owen.
Firstly, hi, and secondly, when I say far right, I think, like you said, there's more to it than just how right wing someone is economically. However, I think it's all sort of linked. So when we describe fascism and Nazism, we're talking about capitalism, which it's a free market, but then backed by more militant force. So America, for instance, while it is quite right wing as a country, it's quite a capitalist nation. It's got quite a lot of deregulation compared to most Western democracies. At the same time, it's not as authoritarian as it could be. It's not fascist because you're missing that militant presence. You're missing the reinforcement of the capitalist system without the it's more suppression of workers. It's not as direct as Mussolini's Italy or Hitler's Nazi Germany. So when we describe the far right of like the Richard Spencers, the Ku Klux Klan, people like that, they want a essentially a capitalist state that oppresses the working class, oppresses the workers, but focuses a lot of its rhetoric on basis of race and a basis of sex and class and like an ulterior supreme standard of humanity. So no LGBT plus people because they're not part of the Übermensch, they're not part of the superior Aryan race. No people who would deem their society less pure and less perfect, which is why like a massive part of Hitler's rhetoric was turning workers against, instead of focusing on the problems of like capitalism, they focused on the problems of race and sex and stuff. So, which is why a lot of people say, oh, the Nazis were left wing because they had socialism in the title. Hitler perverted the use of the word socialism to make it from worker liberation to German liberation, liberate the problems from Aryans, liberate problems from Aryans to remove like Jews and black people and gay people and stuff like that. So when we talk about the far right, to conclude this sort of monologue, we talk about people who not only support capitalism and have firm authoritarian views about capitalism, but want to enforce a sense of nationalism and white supremacy and other sorts of racist ideas and supremacist ideas about society.
Simply put, when I had that discussion with Humane, we kind of did touch up upon that type of thing. I would simply say, like, from how he defined far right, and this obviously there's going to be a difference because you're far left and he's far right himself on the economic front. I mean, yeah, there are people who do support capitalism who, when it comes to on the authoritarian scale, I would say are quasi-fascists. But but they're not as, like, for instance, I'm just going to use the political compass test as an example. Just, I know it's not the most accurate, but let's just use that as an example. According to it placed Hitler as center right, way authoritarian, and it placed Milton Friedman as not too far away from the border of libertarian authoritarian, but still quite right wing. Margaret Thatcher was around that same area, but more authoritarian. And I know you have your criticisms of Margaret Thatcher. And then it placed someone like Stalin on the far left authoritarian scale, and someone like Gandhi on the far left. Well, not far left, but left libertarian. And I do think it's important to mention those type of things because people talk about, like, should there be a state, like how much authority or liberty, or can we find a mix, or is it just one or the other? I mean, Humane's an ANCAP, and I would say minarchist. But I mean, overall, I will say that it is a bit interesting to see how people define left wing or right wing. I mean, like, and it's not to smear the left, to, like, say, oh, the Nazis were socialists. I mean, if someone could prove that a Nazi held the view that capitalism's bad and could prove that's what they actually said, then I guess you could say in that one Nazi's case, yeah, that Nazi was a leftist. But I mean, they'd have to provide the evidence for it, which I don't know.
The idea that the Nazis were left wing primarily comes from people who are, like, sort of attempting to smear the, like you said, smear the left. But you look at the statement and you can refute it with Hitler's own words. Hitler himself said that they only used socialists as a way of winning over working class voters and essentially annulling the problem of the far left from, their electoral hopes. Hitler even said we could have called ourselves the National Liberal Party had liberals been the sort of movement that was winning over a lot of working people in Europe at the time. If you look at what Hitler did in Germany, one of the first things he did was outlaw the Communist Party. He banned them from standing in the elections. And then the Reichstag fire got blamed on a communist, which was the grounds for imprisoning communist leaders and far left activists. Because any fascist will tell you that in order to seize control of the country, you need to remove your most vocal and prescient opposition, which is far left. And like them or hate them, the far left are a crucial part of opposing the far right, which is what Hitler recognized and what Mussolini recognized, and why amongst the first people to be the victims of Nazi control were the far left. But coming on to what you said about Hitler being centre right.
Well, that's what the test said. I'm not saying he's center right. I'm just saying that's what. Okay, that's an analogy, but yeah, you get the idea.
You can look at his economic policies, and again, they're massively. At the time, he was massively supported by many corporations. Famously, Henry Ford was an advocate of Hitler, as well as the Daily Mail owners in the UK, because he was a free market capitalist. Whilst it's true that he used his, the Nazi SS and such to impose their force on the country, the actual state of regulation was massively scaled back. It was very much a capitalist economy because you had corporations operating in a free market and profiting off labor. And yeah, fine, you can argue that controlling things isn't capitalist, but it ignores the fact that very much the integral parts of capitalism, profiting off commodities and private property ownership, were upheld. And indeed, the Nazis made massive profits and massive economic growth because of the masses of free workforce that they had. The prison camps and the concentration camps, they served as a form of free labor. And indeed, the Nazis based this off American segregation systems and prison systems, which were, massively segregated at the time. And you can look at the American prison system today and the way that labor in prisons is used to generate profit for America as a key example of how authoritarianism is an aid to capitalism. but I feel like I've spoken for a while. So
I'll simply say
something real quick to Owen.
Good.
About the what you said they worked the people in the concentration camp. Look, the main point of them was to kill as many Jews as possible. Basically, what the concentration camps were for, and to kill other prisoners they've captured during the war.
Oh, of course, but there was also the added benefit of a free labor surplus.
Yeah.
Not just you obviously have to consider that they didn't just immediately die when they went to the camps. There was also
but they really worked.
Sorry.
So something I was going to bring up was okay, so essentially what I was going to bring up was what you said about the prison system. I have a few issues with it myself. Well, more of the criminal justice system as it currently is, rather than the actual prisons. I'm fine with the prisons being public, but I don't have a problem with the prisons being where the prisoners have to do labor. I mean, as long as it doesn't violate the 8th Amendment, I'm fine with it, as I do believe that it could help people in learning work ethic and being able to have work ethic. And I will say that overall, it's like, what would you rather do? Spend 23 hours in a cell per day, or, I don't know, make license plates or something? Now, my state has banned, the use of private prisons, but as for prison labor, I don't know. But I will say that it is probably a lot better than just having someone sit in a cell for 23 hours a day. It's like it's like when I watched one of your older videos about drug addicts, you made a good point about rehabilitation, because if you don't rehabilitate the person, you basically just locked them in a cage for a while and you did nothing to help them. And
Pretty much.
And going on to the issues of America at the time, there are still issues today that have been in place for a while, like the war on drugs from President Nixon. I would end that if I were president. I would allow businesses to refuse service to people. I would especially allow, for instance, if you owned your own business and you wanted the workers to share the means of production with you, even though me and Geek have had a discussion, we've had a discussion on that. Essentially, if you want to share the means of production with people, you're totally fine to do so. It's just you can't force other businesses to follow your footsteps, I'll say. And I initially, a couple months ago, almost became a communist, I'll admit. I was very close to that, as I felt the arguments about foreign policy and the means of production were some interesting points, but...
Oh, man, so close, damn it.
Oh, well, but essentially, foreign policy, we got people who advocate, like Gary Johnson, for instance, whether you like the guy or not. I do agree with him that non-interventionism is our best option. Like, we should not have... First thing I would do is I would remove as many embargoes against other nations as possible. I would try as much as I can to avoid getting into other wars and to any nations we've attacked in the past. I would try and find a way to rebuild relations with them and essentially attempt to never have that happen again. When people bring up the United States being involved in certain helping other dictatorships, that would stop. I mean, even if it results in me getting assassinated or losing a second term, I would at least try and make America, and I hate to use the term, well, I wouldn't say make America great again, but make America truly about freedom, rather than having the war on drugs be responsible for increasing the prison population for as much as it has been increased.
Oh, damn.
The thing is, it
Sorry.
sounds... Don't worry. I won't. I'll try and curtail how long this one goes on for. It sounds nice, and it's a nice sort of sounding thing to say. But then when you think about a lot of what your policies would mean for America and the way the system at present is, it would probably fall flat. So, for instance, the war on drugs is responsible for making America one of the highest, in fact, the highest prison population in the world by a mile. Like, the amount of prisons, I think, overwhelms the number of schools and universities in America, and that's a massive problem for a lot of people. But the labor that goes on in prisons and the use of prisoners to create higher profit margins for corporations and thus inflate the economy is why American corporations are so wealthy. Is why America is one of the, if not the largest economy on the planet. So to present your case people, saying, no, we don't want a war on drugs. We want to crack down on this idea that people can just be locked away for consuming products through their own choice, is essentially saying we want to curtail your profit. And as we all know, under capitalism, that's not going to happen. Secondly, what?
Oh, I was going to also bring up something I was going to mention is if we were to end the war on drugs, if I could, I would do what Obama did and pardon. He pardoned about 6,000 inmates convicted of nonviolent drug offenses. I would try and do as many as possible throughout that 4-year term I'd have. And even if my approval ratings were about as abysmal as the war on drugs, I would I see it as totally worth it. As a number of Americans, I think. I'm not sure that I'm going to try and find the approval ratings for the war on drugs, how many people approve. Now, it's not an ad populum, but just to show that I think the American people wouldn't mind ending the war on drugs. So go ahead.
Then again, be fair, there's actually a lot of policies that Congress puts forth that the American people do not care for. It kind of like shows actually that like the American people doesn't have as much sway on their Congress or Senate as they think they do. And
Absolutely.
it's abysmal how much sway the American public doesn't have on their legislative bench in America as it currently is. It's mostly the people who donate the most money to the congressmen and the senators and to the Republican National Convention or the Democrat National Convention. It doesn't matter who's in the White House. Yeah, money is power.
Exactly, which is why, F-Man, the idea of just shutting down the war on drugs and shutting down sort of American foreign policy probably wouldn't get very far in Congress, because what you're essentially asking your senators to do is curtail profits and cut the profits of the people who are backing them. So all of a sudden, these politicians aren't going to have their campaign money, like Geek said, and they're not going to get back into office again. And who wants that? So they're not going to vote for your bill, no matter how good and moral it is. It's not the thing that makes the most profit.
I would simply say in response that it is at least better. It's at least, I mean, people say it's easier said than done. That may very well be true, but it's better than not trying at all. Like, okay, so I just posted a link that a bunch of people that Americans are ready to end it. But essentially, my recommendation to anybody, if you do not like the actions of our senators and our politicians, as for instance, my father's a progressive Democrat. I think he's a little left himself. His suggestion is, he would tell me, is we got to vote out these Republicans because he's very anti-Republican. Is Republicans as vote Democrat at the very least, whether you like him or not, at least tactically vote Democrat to get the Republicans out. So if there's a person of a political party you don't like and you don't vote for that political party, I mean, I'm not saying that it's all black and white, but at the very least try and find a solution to the issue at hand.
Yeah, but then
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off.
No worries.
I think the problem's not the intention, because lots of people want to end the war on drugs. It's how that transfers to the actual consequence and outcome, and what is actually done. So, for instance, you can try and vote out Republicans, and by all means, we should be voting. But at the same time, that's not going to translate very well, because as what Geek pointed out, the Democrats aren't exactly much better than the Republicans of ending these sort of policies. I mean, quite famously, the Clinton administration was terrible for the war on drugs. Their policies, in many ways, were responsible for the high incarceration rate we're seeing, today.
Being tough on crime.
Exactly. Democrats and Republicans both are firmly right-wing parties backed by extremely wealthy individuals and corporations. And if you try and cut the war on drugs, if you try and end many of the foreign policies that have disgraced America's name, you're going to cut their profits. So again, I think it's all very well saying you can try, and trying is better than doing nothing. And it's important to try, but at the same time, that still leads to nothing being changed. You're still going to have people in prison for consuming marijuana, for being in possession of drugs that they are only intending to use themselves. So I again ask, what would the actual solution be? Because I've got my own ideas, but within capitalism, I don't see how these problems can just go away.
Well,
and And American politicians right now, once they get back into office or to get into office, the first day or day of inauguration or whatever and something like that, their staff are on the phones already calling donors to ask to donate for the campaign trail because it's conservatorial election and you need money to run a campaign, because if you don't run a campaign, you're not going to get elected. And oftentimes it is a good indicator of like whoever is able to raise the most money is, generally speaking, like congressional, senator, and gubernatorial elections, as well as like state legislative elections. Oftentimes it is the person who raised the most money that's able to like get into office.
I'll point out. For instance, when FDR had began his fourth term, he later died in his fourth term. But because he had served 4 terms, they put term limits on the office of president for how many times someone could faithfully execute the office of president of the United States. And I'm strongly in favor of term limits for all political offices, because it seems, and it's pretty obvious that if you become a senator or something, you're in there for life essentially, unless people do vote you out or you retire or die. And with Orrin Hatch from my state, he's been a politician, a career politician. I will acknowledge it. Yes, it's not very easy to correct the problems at hand, but since capitalism's not going anywhere for a very, very, very long time, I mean, since it's going to be here for quite a while, it's essentially is to get people, to have them aware of it, to have that. And my ideas are, when it comes to the donors and everything, I would try and find a solution to try and prevent corporations from being able to back politicians. People can say all they want. Oh, it's free money. Giving someone money is free speech. It's not. It's like absolutely not. If burning a flag is free speech, I just lost where I was going to go with that point. You go ahead.
But do you see the problems that are arising here? So, for instance, putting term limits in is great because, like you said, it's not good to have one person just sort of having 30 years as a senator. But the next person who's coming in has the same views as the last guy. They're all from the same school of thought, where they have to essentially be the puppet of the corporations funding their campaigns. Like what Geek said, they're going to have the same stance because they're not going to, think, oh, I can't afford to lose this funding money. Which is why Nixon, Bush Senior, Clinton, Bush Junior, Obama, and now Trump, none of them are going to end the war on drugs. None of them are going to address the massive problem that's in the prison system. This has been a problem for 40 years. It will be next year, I think. Since in fact, that's an entire generation of people and more. And it's not changed at all, despite the clear knowledge, but it's not something that's right. And you say, oh, you can make it so that corporations can't affect the government, and again, that's something that politicians can't vote for. I mean, it's all very well saying, oh, we will do this, but then every time you strike to make that happen, you're going to see people backed by the corporations not do that. For instance, election rules, they were being addressed, but now Trump, now he's in office again, has suddenly scrapped a load of them. So, for instance, churches and religious organizations formerly had to, there was a limit on how much they could do. I think, in fact, I don't think they were allowed to back candidates with financially.
I remember hearing that too, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They got rid of that, and now that's the case. So now you're going to see these massive conservative bodies who have, they've got awful views, clearly not in any means a good idea to have in your government, but they've got a lot of money, and there's no limit on how much they can put into their government funding and who they're going to back. So you're going to see Republicans with some of the most heinous, awful ideas win elections because they've got backers who can give them dwarf what the Democrats have or whoever else is running. I think what I'm asking of you isn't to say, oh, well, we're going to change the system over there, because like you said, it's silly to just sort of imagine capitalism's going to go in like a snap of a finger. But I'm instead asking you to sort of reflect on where you stand and sort of think, are these ideas going to change anything? Will we be in the same situation if we continue thinking that capitalism can fix its own problems within capitalism?
All right, so to address the point, when it comes to the religious people we're barred from backing politicians, right? You've noticed the trend from Donald Trump where he reversed a ton of things Obama signed executive orders for, and it wouldn't surprise me if he would try and sign some executive order reversing what Obama had for dinner the night before he left office. Now, when it comes to things that Donald Trump has signed reversing, it becomes a constant thing where it seems like one president will sign a bunch of things as executive orders or sign a ton of things into law, then his successor will take everything that person did and attempt to completely obliterate their legacy. Well, not obliterate, but erase their legacy and reverse those type of things. So, for instance, let's say, I don't know, a Democrat wins the 2020 election. Let's say Trump's a one-term president. Or in 2024, the person who succeeds Donald Trump hopefully reverse a number of things he's done, like that and a host of other things as an example.
The one thing that needs to be corrected is the trans ban. If you're familiar with familiar with what
trans military ban.
Yeah,
I honestly I've thought about that whole mess. I've thought about it as of the last few months.
and the most ridiculous thing is everybody said, "Oh, Trump," or some people I know in real life said Trump's for the LGBT. All right, first of all, that's a dumbass. That's a dumbass thing to ever do. It's ban trans in the military. Yeah, right. Trump would be for that.
I mean, I've actually had an entire video drama with one YouTuber about this. I've had part of a debate about this whole thing. So I've spoken my piece on it. I personally wouldn't have done it. I personally would not have signed any executive order trying to ban him from the military, as honestly, if you want to serve your country and you want to risk going to a country that if they capture you, they'd kill you. I mean, I don't know. It's just that whole thing. I think it was just unprofessional how it was announced to the public, and I'd rather bring our troops home instead of bullshit oil war.
Basically, what my dad says is defend our own nation instead of defend. Well, I would still defend other nations, mainly our allies, but like my dad says, why are we risking our lives over there in the Middle East for nothing? I mean, for most of the case.
I'll expand on that. Actually, we have fucked up the Middle East for a long time.
Yeah,
War Corps-esque language, but I think it makes a point that I think there's some nations that will forever hate us, and I honestly, even though I'll say that they do have the right to hate us, and they can hate us for the longest time, but I would simply try, like like I said, I would at least, if I were elected, I would at least give the effort rather than just say it. I would actually try my damnedest to do it. And even if I get assassinated, I get impeached, or I get voted out, at the very least, there will be the effort made to keep the promises that presidents all the time, the reason you see them have such low approval ratings when they leave is either because they did a horrible job as president or they didn't keep their promises. So when you look at George W. Bush, for instance, when 9/11 happened and for a while after it happened, his approval rating was from 80 to 90%, right? And by the time he left office in January of 2009, he had a 19% approval rating, and he's been regarded as one of the worst presidents we've ever had. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to W43, but it's honestly true. And I will say that the non-interventionist foreign policy, and I've argued with people who call me a regressive right-winger for it. Honestly, it is the best policy to hold, as with how the president of the United States has been handling North Korea. Not intervening at this point would probably save our lives in certain instances, and I think every other war besides since World War II has probably been unnecessary for us to fight in. And I will acknowledge that the United States is worthy of criticism. I'm not going to deny that, but I will say that. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going on. Go ahead.
I got to go, guys.
All right.
Sorry, Godric, you go ahead.
Oh, he left. Okay.
In that case, I'll go ahead. So again, I want to bring up again you say, the war in the Middle East was a waste of time, and yeah, it was obvious from the start, pretty much, but there weren't.
It was a waste of a lot of money too.
Exactly, it was a massive waste of time.
Oh yeah.
But look at how
It's
rich Dick
pointless.
Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld are now. Look at how George Bush is. He's a wealthy, rich person who can do painting instead of being in prison for war crimes and slaughtering thousands of people. You've got to ask yourself why these conflicts keep happening, because, like you said, there have been so many wars since World War II that have been caused or propagated by America. And you can say, oh yeah, there was no point in it, we should be non-interventionist. Then someone else will say, oh well, look at the corporation, look at the profits we've been able to raise since we've started these wars. Look at what happens in Latin America when America comes in, overthrows the democracy, makes the country more right-wing and more privatized, and the profits back in America for corporations have improved. The state has more money, but that came through anti-democratic warfare and espionage and sabotage. Like the policies that make America so wealthy and make capitalism in the West so wealthy all come from the things you're criticizing here, S-Man. And I'm not trying to say, I'm not trying to get some sort of one-up over you or anything, but I think it's important to sort of realistically consider where these solutions are going to come from, because you talk about term limits and how a president has a low approval rating and stuff, and how you can try and vote in the next one, and it's going to be the same thing again. It's why every president, like you said, has a lower approval rating when they come out and when they go in, because the change is never going to come. There's a certain futility to the position of presidency, and just sort of the whole situation in capitalist democracy, where people don't see any real change to their lives, and certainly for the past 40 years since neoliberalism has been and neoconservatism has been the main sort of focal point of politics. There's been so little that people are getting fed up with it, which is really a populist, a person firmly on the right, and you could even say proto-far right, Donald Trump was able to win, in my opinion. But anyway,
let's not. I want to bring up something. Let's not forget that the president doesn't have that much power as we like to think we have. Yeah, the president can do things because there's checks and balances. Like Obama couldn't do as much as he could because he did not expect that the Republican Congress was going to stonewall him so much that it forced a government shutdown and stuff like that. So there's that that wrinkle to the whole. If I were president, I would do X, X, and X and stuff like that. Well, you could do that, but you can at least try. But let's not forget that it's also the Congress and the Senate as part of the process as well. You got to flip those houses, but also. Let's all not forget that even though we are focused on the president and the senators and the Congress because that's the national government and stuff like that, most of the local government, the state governments and the city councils and the counties, they make a lot of decisions. Like in some states, 2,000 bills go through their state legislature, and those bills directly affect people on the local level much more than the national bills, and yet they don't get as much attention. And plus, there's a lot of Republicans that are in seats in the state legislations buildings that go unopposed. So there's also that kind of wrinkle with the political system that we have in America. Just to add to the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. So to point that out, I am aware that there are checks and balances, but like I said, at the very least, it's better than just like obviously we can chat about the problems of the United States and but at the very least, someone would be in there attempting to do so. And to point out that Bill Clinton, whether you like the guy or you think he was I don't know, a right-wing Stalin, but essentially Bill Clinton, for his misconduct, was impeached, although not removed from office. People have brought impeachment proceedings or have made efforts to impeach certain presidents. We've got Bill Clinton. He was actually impeached. He was the second to happen after Andrew Johnson. Then you got efforts to impeach George W. Bush, but the reason they dropped the proceedings is because he was nearing the end of his presidency anyway, so it'd be a moot reason to do it. Barack Obama, even though people might argue it's because the Republicans hated him because of his race, I think it was more because they didn't like what he was doing. Then you got efforts already to try and impeach Donald Trump, which if that's a horrible idea, considering if we do, it goes to Pence, and he's probably far worse than the old Trumpster himself. But essentially, like when it comes to these presidents, obviously they don't have as much power as we think they do. And when presidents and the Congress, like that's why I encourage people to get out and vote, because when people constantly whine and complain about the problems, like I'm not saying you guys are whining and complaining, I just want to make that clear. But when people do complain, but they don't vote, they can't honestly expect anything good to come out of it. That's why there were something. Jimmy Carter, I think he opposed a Supreme Court decision that I think it barred corporations from giving to companies, or at least a certain amount. I'd have to look it up again. But with Jimmy Carter, I would actually look upon him more favorably for being for Supreme Court decision. I mean, every other president from Jimmy Carter to now, I mean, they're with how they are, it's like some presidents had some high approval ratings, like Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. He had 60% approval rating, but some of the presidents were. Zach himself has referred to George W. Bush as a political dunce, which I think is a bit accurate. But go ahead.
But are you starting to see the sort of flaws with capitalist democracy? Like you said, like very correctly said, if you impeach Donald Trump, suddenly you've got this massive line of Republicans who are just as bad, if not worse, than Trump, waiting to come in after him. Like you said, you don't like it when people complain and then don't vote. And that can be perceived as quite annoying. And you can see why that would be. If you're not participating in elections, then you shouldn't complain. But just as equally, lots of people do vote, and then their votes mean nothing because their votes are discarded at the end, and their policies aren't reflected. Lots of people can't vote because they've been put in prison and they've lost the right to vote because they're a felon. Lots of people can't vote because their state has terrible voter ID laws, which then
exactly
from voting. You said yourself, what's it called? Bush had terrible approval ratings, and people wanted to impeach him, but he still had 8 years in office. Trump's still going to get a 4-year term at least. Obama, he still had 8 years even. These people, presidents, like they aren't able to change the ordinary lives of people because there are massive inherent flaws with capitalist democracy. And like you said, Jimmy Carter back in the 70s put in legislator to end corporate, meddling in elections. Where's it gone now? It's now being reversed. You're now losing legislation that should have been sort of integral to the system. So, 40 years of progress is potentially being lost, and more. Even in fact 80 years, because there's some of the New Deal components which somehow are still protecting American rights and stuff are being looked at to be removed. Like, how can you explain that you're going to have the same fights we had 50, 60 years ago again, because of the inherent problems of the capitalist system, where there's always going to be those efforts to maximize profits, and that you're always going to have the war on drugs, the election fraud, where voters' rights are curtailed, everything else that we've mentioned. Like, these things aren't going to go away simply because you try and put a law down. And yeah, it's good to try, but to a point you have to say, well, what good is just trying by doing this one thing? We have to look at a better way, because we can't have a society with these problems.
Okay, to go back to what you said about presidents and low approval. Well, okay. Oh God.
Okay.
Oh,
Can
God.
I say something?
All right, go ahead, Ham.
The thing is with trying something new, we do have something that we know works. Iceland is famous for locking up its bankers for their fraud during the 2008-2009 stock market crash.
And Obama did the same. Obama did have financial sanctions against, if I can find the article, but
no one went to prison. Iceland actually convicted and sent to prison the bankers responsible for the stock market crash.
Okay, to go back to what Owen was saying about Obama and George W. Bush, the reason he was able to serve out the remainder of his second term was because the impeachment proceedings were brought so late in his second term. If they probably would have, done it in late first term, early second term, the chances could have increased. And we've had a president who was pretty dangerously close to being impeached, but he resigned the presidency because he knew that his career was over in the sense of the presidency, and that was Richard Milhouse Nixon. And going back to what you said about the line of succession, the reason that's there is so if a president is removed from office, like they could just put somebody else in there. Let me find the presidential line of succession to point out, because there's like 17 people in the president.
And also, Trump is probably the most likely president in decades to be removed. Not just because he's so unpopular, but because he's so overtly breaking the law.
And to point out again, he would be the first.
Sorry, man, you go ahead.
Okay. So essentially, there's 17 people, and to point out that he would be the first if he were to be impeached and actually removed. Because let's keep in mind, no president. There's only been two presidents, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton, have been impeached, but they were acquitted by the Senate, and as a result, they were not removed from office. So they were able to. So in the case of Bill Clinton, I'd have to look back at Andrew Johnson, but in the case of Bill Clinton,
wasn't Nixon impeached?
No, he was not impeached. He resigned the presidency, being the only president to do so, and the presidency was sent off to Gerald Ford, who, whether you like the guy or hate the guy, I mean, he was the one who would end up becoming the next president after that. So yeah, I mean, I don't see the problem with having a presidential line of succession itself.
But, can you see the problems that are arising here, though? Like Bush, for instance. Yeah, he was close to the end of his term anyway. But at the same time, he still had 8 years at the helm. He still did the damage, and he's still he's massively wealthy now. Got his own ranch in Texas. He faced no consequence for essentially, devastating the Middle East. You said, there's 17 people after Trump to come in who will do the same things and worse. Mike Pence, just this awful homophobe. He's like what?
He's arguably worse than Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's why we can't impeach Donald Trump. As much as I like
the problems, though, like what I'm trying to say is that the whole system is fundamentally broken. Because you're not gonna. If you keep the guy Donald Trump, you're gonna have problems. If you get rid of him, you're gonna have more problems, and you have to keep on going, rely on an election in a few years' time, but might not. There's no potential improvement coming. Republicans could win again. The Democrats, if they win, are they even going to improve that much?
Here's the thing. We have the internet now. We have the ability to transmit information on a scale that's never been seen before. We're having long-time incumbent politicians, corporate politicians, losing elections or just winning by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah, and
the change is coming.
Yeah, and
we had the internet in 2016, and Trump won.
Trump won because the Democrats put up literally the worst possible option for a Democratic nominee.
Let's not forget the Russians' involvement. Let's not forget the voter suppression. Let's not forget the Electoral College. Because I disagree. I think Russia had some sort of involvement, but I don't think it was directly to fiddle with the election to the point where they purposely got the Trump in. But they did certainly help Trump in the campaign and stuff like that. But no one expected that the Trump to win, according to the polls. But I think Russia did infiltrated the election system at some point. To what ends, we don't know for sure, and the investigation is ongoing. But for what I can see, in my opinion, the Russians did get involved.
Okay, I immediately dismiss any claims of Russian involvement unless you have direct evidence of them affecting the election. Because all this Russia scare shit is just more, let's bring back the Cold War shit, Red Scare, Red Scare! It's utter horseshit. It's a deflection. It's a distraction.
And hang on a second. I mean, Owen's going to accuse you and I later on, probably after this. He's probably going to accuse us both of using Red Scare tactics. So he'll probably call us hypocrites for that. I'm just kidding. Essentially, I will point out that like I was going to mention, it was with Hillary Clinton in the election. If it would have been somebody else, that Donald Trump may have lost. And I will also point out that people were marginalized, and there's absolute evidence that I've in my older videos about the election, I pointed out that there were people who were marginalized. Now, that's obviously not the only reason why the election went the way it did. And the Electoral College point, I mean, I'm not strongly for or against it, but I do see the point to it. I used to not see the point to it, but further, I do see a point to it. But, I mean, I always find it a bit, I wouldn't say, I guess you could say ludicrous that people constantly blame capitalism. It's just, I mean, and people constantly say capitalism is just the private ownership of the means of production. It's like, how exactly do we would publicly have, we'd have the means of production publicly owned.
Well,
say that's just.
May I address that you say why is capitalism blamed? Under a non-capitalist system, all of a sudden your economic crimes that you see people in prison for under this system, they're not happening because suddenly people aren't needing to steal to survive. Suddenly you're not needing people to go and like rob a grocery store to feed their kids. Suddenly you're not seeing politicians elected to essentially serve their corporate masters, because you know there's not going to be no bribes to be had. There's going to be no corporation being able to say, we're going to give you millions if you pass this bill that deregulates our control over prisons and stuff. Like all of a sudden, all these problems that you're seeing because of the capitalist idea of making profit of commodities, of increasing your capital to better yourself in society, they're all gone. The war on drugs is one of the main driving reasons we still have it, is because it produces a hell of a lot of profit for corporations. We mentioned earlier how abysmal American foreign policy has been for decades. A major reason that's happening is because it allows America to go into a country, introduce a new government which deregulates its previous rules, and allows corporations to put their own stuff there and make profit and money. It allows them to sell oil, for instance, which has made America billions. The whole point of saying capitalism is a problem isn't just for someone to laugh. It's to address the problems with society, namely that America, a capitalist nation, has essentially been victim of terrible policies and broken competitive politics for decades. We're saying, oh well, if it wasn't Hillary Clinton, I find the fact Hillary versus Trump to be somewhat irrelevant, really. It doesn't matter if the Democrats put Hillary up, because it was coming anyway. There was always going to be this populist right-wing candidate that was going to take a surprise win over Hillary Clinton. And whether it was Hillary or, I think Bernie Sanders would have been a great choice, but only to a certain degree. In the American system of capitalism, you're always going to see someone like Trump eventually come out, because you're always risking potential for a far right or right wing extremist to rise. And to draw it to a conclusion, really, what I was saying is that you can't just expect to keep the system of capitalism and then just not have any problems. It's never going to go away. And I mean, unless your conclusion is you're willing to accept that society is never going to get better and it's only going to get worse from here.
Oh my God!
Hey, now, let the guy talk. Let the guy talk. Owen, continue.
Unless you're willing to accept that society is only going to get worse with capitalism, certainly environmentally, I mean, that's just another story. But unless you're willing to accept that things are only going to get worse, you have to sort of say, no, the system needs changing because something is fundamentally wrong for all the reasons we've outlined here and more. Anyway, I'm sure you have a response.
Okay, I'll respond to what you're saying.
Hey, can I say something? I mean, it's the first time me saying something.
Okay, I'm just gonna make it quick though. Okay, so what I was going to say is, if people made the efforts to impeach a president, and maybe they could avoid what happened with George W. Bush being able to complete a second term, because if people find the president to be breaking the law or violating the Constitution that they swore to preserve, protect, and defend, then since we're still very early in Trump's first term, the efforts to impeach him, I think, are stronger. Like, the likelihood is stronger considering how early we are in the term. If we wait till, he's in the late stages of first term or second term, then you guys waited too long, and I don't feel bad for those that waited too long to try and impeach W.
You say that there are always going to be right-wing leaders at Owen McDonald. I mean, even if Bernie Sanders was to win the election, you're still going to eventually have a right-wing leader. I find that to be kind of a moot point regarding systems of voting, because you're always going to have interchanging of opinions, national opinions in a country. I mean, for example, with the presidency here, it's interchanging between Republican and Democrat. I mean, we went from, let's say, far left, for example, with FDR, and yeah, sure, you laugh at that.
He's more left than I'd say other presidents. Like he was to the left of a lot of our presidents.
Okay. You get my point. You get my point, though, Owen McDonald. Yeah, sure. You can make the point that every leftist here in America is pretty moderate.
Hey, Zach, you're cutting out.
He would of Reagan or either the Bushes or Trump, and the thing is, you had like Nixon. Well, it's kind of debatable of whether he was like I don't know.
He attacked the left.
I'm just gonna give the benefit of the doubt and say that he was right wing. And then you had only his successor Ford, and then there were a leftist who actually increased the minimum wage. So, and then there was Reagan. Then you had H. Bush to take over for one more term because Reagan was still popular throughout a lot of his years. And then H. Bush became unpopular. Bill Clinton raised in polls. He became president for two terms, and then it interchanged back to Bush Jr., then Obama, and now Trump. And it's we're probably going to have another leftist. Like if you give Trump a full 8 years, I mean, I doubt if he's even going to get 2 terms at all. He might get elected out in 2020. So again, your point of there are always going to be right-wing leaders is a moot point in a system of voting. I mean, unless you want to like set up a monarchy, but even then, family lines are going to eventually have differing political beliefs and opinions and how they want to rule a country.
Yes.
And I'll point out as something I needed to point out, as Zach was saying, FDR was on the left. I wouldn't say like I'm just going to say. I don't think he was necessarily on the left wing side of it, but I'd say he's probably, along with Lyndon B. Johnson with the war on poverty, was at least a little bit to the left of our, especially our more recent presidents. But I wouldn't. I mean, a lot of the presidents seem to be my issue. My common issue is sometimes like the social issues with the presidents, like foreign policy. Like if unless it's non-interventionist, I'm not voting for them. I will vote for Gary Johnson's corpse over any Democrat or Republican on foreign policy on the foreign policy issue if it's not non-interventionist. When it comes to the social issues, I would again vote for any other. I'd vote for anybody else when it comes to the social issues. That's non-negotiable, like pro-choice. They're fine with gay marriage, but it's guaranteed now. And no matter what any Republican says, it's staying. And with these people with these horrific views, for instance, let me pull up his name. Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, he's second in line in the presidential line of succession after Mike Pence. He's pro-life in all circumstances. So, and no, I don't think Roe v. Wade is going to go away anytime soon. And no matter how hard the conservatives try, I think it's going to stay, especially after the Supreme Court ruled on it. But then again, the Supreme Court ruled gay marriage to be, I believe, in Minnesota, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in one way, and then 44 years later, they vote another way. So it would take a hell of a lot of change in order for that to happen. But with these people with these horrific views, there have been protests of what Donald Trump has tried to do. I mean, and that's great. I'm totally cool with protests. Like, people have protested his supposed Muslim ban. They've fought against all travel bans or bans in general. Hang on a second. Let me just deal with that.
Am I okay to
yeah,
are you finished, Esma?
Yeah, I lost my train of thought because Colton Ham was rudely doing the dishes while
yeah, come on, man. Ahead. Don't be doing the dishes.
Okay, so I'm going to respond to Zach's point. So I don't think you understood, or you may have misunderstood what I was saying. I'm not saying that, it's bad if there's I'm not saying that elections that produce right-wing leaders are a sign that the whole system is broken. What I'm actually saying is that the system's not going to improve whilst you have a system of capitalism. Like you said, you listed off the succession of a presidency from Nixon to Reagan and so on. Nixon to Ford, even to Reagan. Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush Senior, Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, Trump. Yeah. And under all of them, you still see.
I don't know if you got my point.
Okay.
Well, if you
I like to point out something funny. Owen says that if we have a capitalist system, we can't improve, even though we are in fact improving. In fact, we have economically, we have social democracies like Iceland, France, Germany, UK, the Norway, Denmark. They're all fundamentally capitalist systems, and they have improved from their earlier capitalist systems. And in fact, even America, as far down as we've got, we're improving. And I like the projection of how a capitalist system can improve, where we know from history that socialist countries, every single one of them has stagnated and gone into decline until they just finally fell apart.
Okay.
Firstly, that has nothing to do with what I was saying, and secondly, if we're
It's a refutation of what you were saying.
Okay. Let's calm down a second.
Oh my God.
Okay. Let's just before he goes with the that wasn't communist, and I saw your video response to us about that. That still brings laughter to me. And you were pointing out other nations that in your video on homelessness, the video I responded.
Sorry to interrupt, S-Man, but do you think we could go back to what
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
saying?
Yeah, go ahead. No problem.
Yeah.
So the systems that you say, are examples of capitalism working. So France, Iceland. You mentioned the Nordic countries. And yeah, they're better than America is, but that's not to say that they work. They're still the same problems that exist in America that exist in those nations, just to a lesser degree. Because the more left wing you go, generally the better your country is, which is why Denmark has lower poverty rates and greater equality than America. But that doesn't mean there's no problems. That just means the problems are lesser and less severe because it's a less pure version of capitalist. And you're technically right. They are social democracies around the world. We don't have a pure capitalist system. But as I should hope we all come to agreement, a pure capitalist system would be horrific because you'd essentially be facing a situation where, your entities that are the wealthiest, like McDonald's, Nike, they've got freedom to do as they wish because there's literally nothing stopping them. There's no regulation whatsoever.
Well, I think we can all agree that a pure capitalist system is awful, which is why the best systems in the world are a mix of capitalist and some elements of socialism.
But then what I'm saying in response to that is that if you, like you said, all these nations are social democracies, yet they're still the same problems that capitalism produces. They're still the same idea.
What problems?
Hey, let him talk.
Like we've just been saying,
seriously,
the poor version of elections that we're seeing in America, where people can vote and there's nothing changed because of the amount of gerrymandering that's going on in the States. The completely abysmal decisions made by the US in terms of foreign policy and by many other Western European nations. Like my own country, the UK, has got a pretty horrific foreign policy record. We supported Iraq. We supported the US even in the Iraq War.
Tony Blair.
And how is that a problem with capitalism? That sounds like a criticism of how our democracies work.
And
it doesn't work because of the effect capitalism has on it.
Okay, and
it's independent of each other. It's all because of systemic problems.
And
it's capitalism capitalism is a kind of like is an economic system that like strives off of like the populace not being well informed, because Noam Chomsky talked about like advertisements. The advertisers do not want a well informed consumer, because a well informed consumer wouldn't buy those useless or not so useful gadgets and products or the newest latest iPhones or whatever. And so that's why capitalism doesn't want its populace to be well informed, because if they was well informed, they wouldn't buy the products that they're trying to sell them.
Okay, I'm going to address all these points.
That's
I'm going to
kinda
start
cool.
off with Geek, what you said about them not wanting an informed populace. Well, they are screwed in that sense. For instance, if when it comes to products, let's say computer I'm using to stream right now, it's Windows 10, or at least has the program of Windows 10. If I found out that some kid lost a few fingers in a mine in Africa for this computer to be made, and I found it so horrific and everything, and if I were to find out that information and just do a simple Google search and find a reliable source to provide evidence for that claim, I could easily just say I don't want this computer anymore and find a way to get rid of it without destroying it, so it doesn't become totally worthless. Now, going back to what Owen said about not foreign policy, it was the drug war. The drug war, as I've actually done reading up on the drug war, it is unconstitutional. It violates the Fourth Amendment, and people support up for the war on drugs. They are supporting something that violates the Fourth Amendment, and a very old law that was there. It's been eroded since the 80s, that separated the local law enforcement and the armed forces. That was something that the war on drugs has eroded. And by the way, in your video about homelessness, as I've made a response to it, I can only imagine you're surprised at that. I've shown that the United States, when it comes to, let me just go back to the link, on economic freedom, there are countries more economically free than the United States. It falls under mostly free. The United Kingdom's number 12. The most economically free is Hong Kong, and the least economically free, and this is going to be a huge surprise, North Korea.
Surprise.
I hate to quote Paul Joseph Watson, but imagine my shock that North Korea be the least economically free nation in the world, and Hong Kong is number one.
You're quoting Paul Joseph Watson.
He's a dumb son of a bitch. So
I can't stand Paul Joseph Watson. I mean, he's extremely arrogant.
But besides
brain juice before every broadcast.
Okay, besides the point. That was just a joke. It's just a joke. Like, whenever people point out the problems of capitalism, and my main problem with socialism, or at least your brand of socialism, I think it's anarchist socialism or communism, whatever you want to call it. When people say the workers deserve to own the means of production, that's my main contention. Everything else, I can say, okay, this is not entirely perfect, but I do believe that private ownership of the means of production, private property rights, the right to discriminate, or in other words, a business owner's right to refuse service to somebody, I think is absolutely justified. That was a question I asked in my video, in the questions capitalists have for communists and socialists, which response though, you called it classist, which I'm not sure why you call it classist when I said, and you said in response it was a classist view when I said that why do the workers deserve to own the means of production? And you said you called it classist or something. Can you explain why you called it classist? That I think it was either that or the I think it was I think it was that, and then I mentioned that the workers, and I said, might not understand the regulations. They might not, and there's thousands of pages. You might break a few laws every day trying to follow all those regulations. Go ahead.
I'm going to respond to that. I'm trying to respond to the because there's lots of stuff that people have said which I want to respond to. Should I respond to that and then the rest, or just?
I also have a question for Owen after you guys are done. It kind of plays into what S-Man was asking.
Okay. So when people say workers should own the means of production, they don't mean every worker should be filling off paperwork forms and be responsible for every single thing. What they mean is those who do the work, those who do labor, should own the produce and the fruits of their own labor. So you'd still have a person who could manage the paperwork, and still have people who could to make sure people were working well, but they aren't able to then exploit and profit off the people working around them, as we see under capitalist ideas and the capitalist system. When what I said was classist was the fact that you were saying workers might not be able to understand it, as though people who were in fields, or I say fields, people who were in areas, doing stuff, wouldn't be able to comprehend what was going on around them. People have intelligence. People aren't like simpletons. They understand what they're doing.
Could you start over? I actually missed that. I had a. That's why I muted myself. I hate to ask you to start over, but could you repeat yourself again on the point that the question I had asked?
From the start.
We gotta go do something. I'll be back, guys.
Yeah, I hate to be picking all, but I had a friend knock on the door. So go ahead.
And by the way, are you picking on your headphones or something, Owen?
Me?
Yeah, because there's this constant popping noise, and I noticed that happened a lot during my debate with you as well.
Sounded like a styrofoam.
Is it this?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my pen. It's I've been with the top bit a lot. Like
not
push
quite that, but whatever.
Go ahead, Owen.
Maybe it's Cold of Hand doing some background things as well and not muting himself.
Oh no, I heard the same exact sound when I was debating Owen, but
it sounded like a
whatever.
styrofoam cup was getting. It sounded like a styrofoam cup was getting stabbed to death. Go ahead.
Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, when we say workers... Sorry.
What the hell? Go ahead. Just go ahead.
I think Lovely Wolf just muted himself.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Anyway, when we say workers should own the means of production, what we mean is that workers, those who do labor, those who put time in, should own their own produce. The workers, meaning the collective, everyone in society basically, and thus they should own their own produce. They should be able to control and benefit from the labor they've done. So if you have, as we do in capitalism, a boss who is taking the work of those who have done the work and profiting off it, thus benefiting themselves and denigrating the position of the workers, that is unfair, because despite doing nothing, the person who has not done the labor is getting the rewards of it. And you can say, as was said earlier, that the boss, they put the money in to make the work possible, but then that's a circular argument, because without the boss's money to start the company or build the factory came from said labor exploitation in the first place. To move on to, you said, there should be private property. Again, property or land has no true owners. It's there, and then someone puts a stake in it and says, yeah, it should be mine. And it should be easy to see where this is bad, because there's no need for land to be portioned off by an individual. And lots of people, when they hear this, they think, you want to take away our houses, and you want to make us all live in like little 2x2 square block flats. And that's simply that's really not true. The only people who'd be losing out from worker ownership of a means of production would be if you're say a trillionaire or a billionaire and you own like an island or a massive amount of land, because it's ridiculous for one person or a corporation to have that stupendous size portion of land. If you have a house, you're going to be fine. In fact, you'll be better off, because you're no longer having to pay rent to your horrible landlord who's got the land illegitimately. But you're being
I have no problem paying my rent.
Zach, just let him finish. Let him finish.
Well, yeah. That's not an actual argument, is it? I've got no problem paying my rent, but you shouldn't have to, should you? Why should someone just own land and you have to, make your you have to pay him or pay them?
Because you're living on his land.
But why is it their land?
Exactly.
Because they bought it. Because
they own it. They bought it.
Let him talk.
Who did they buy it from?
I'm just going to respond to this. So, Ham, try not to be too much of a hothead. So, essentially, I'm going to start off with the means of production, and then after that, I want to talk to Owen about right to discriminate, because he seems to not agree. He seems to agree with Ham on this, which is not surprising. Okay, so
before you start, I may have to go soon, because
actually, I'm actually going to
in the UK.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap this up. So just type in the side chat when you're going to go. So because I don't plan on going on too much longer. So, going back to what you said about the that they should own their own labor. Well, the person who's the boss, if an employee messes up, whose neck is first on the chopping block? The boss, because their employee messed up, and really, like people will complain to the manager, and the manager will feel like an ass about it because their employee was too incompetent to do their job. And as to point out, like I when I was in that video, I wasn't trying to like insult the intelligence of like the workers. I wasn't trying to say that corpse-esque language or use what JJ did in the video when he called people retarded. I'm not trying to be like that, but I wasn't saying that the employees are like mentally incompetent and they can't like actually think for themselves. It's just they were hired to do the job, is to produce whatever they're producing, like whether it's a sandwich or whether it's it has on his face, it's like that's the one job they have to do. Like that's all they're being asked to do. They're not asked to run the business. Like they have one job and that's it. And essentially, the boss does carry the responsibility of paying the taxes, all these things. Like the bosses and the CEOs, they're not totally worthless. They're not absolutely useless people. I mean, I would. If I were in charge of a company, if a CEO, let's take Dunkin' Donuts for instance, if I were in charge, and this is not like the United States Congress, so I'd have a little more leeway with my company, I would absolutely strike. I would cut the CEO's pay, as it would seem excessive to earn a couple $1,000s an hour, right? And overall, it's like the workers, I think, are not entitled to the means of production. And coming back to what you said about private land and private property, essentially, I will point out to everybody that when it comes to private land, saying it's not legitimately owned. I hate to bring this up, but when you buy a piece of land, it's legitimately owned. I would also point out to you, Owen, that simply put, when it comes to private land, it's something you'd constantly bring up about how in the past someone may have stolen it. There's a statute of limitations on everything, my friend. I understand you say, well, that's convenient, but it's true though. We have statutes of limitations on things like, I don't know, burglary, kidnapping, rape. We have statutes of limitations on a lot of things. And also coming back, actually, I think I've gone on long enough. You go ahead in response to that.
Okay, so like you said, there's a slight echo. Someone's mic's a bit loud.
I've turned down everyone's volume just because like the JJ had a lot of background noise, so it's probably Geek is muted. So
okay,
yeah, I have headphones in, so there's no echo coming from me,
and there's none coming from me. So anyway, just persevere, my friend. Go ahead.
Okay. Like I said to Zach a second ago, I think. Was it Zach? Or was it? No, I think I said to you, actually. The boss's money, in the first place, it comes from the exploitation and the profiting of other people's labor that I mentioned a second ago. Like, if they're wealthy enough to buy a factory, or to have this massive piece of land, their wealth has obviously come from the exploitation of labor, and thus, so it's to say, oh well, they provided the jobs or they provided the factory is redundant because they shouldn't have been in a position to do that. They shouldn't have had that colossal amount of wealth anyway in the first place. Secondly, when you say that it's the boss's neck who's on the line if an employee makes a mistake, that's just not true at all. Anyone who can tell you, like working in a fast food restaurant, for instance, if someone puts like a poorly made together burger, it's them who's going to get the flack for it. If someone is late a few too many times, they'll be the one that gets fired. The boss isn't going to care. And yeah, you can complain to the manager, but the manager has the power over their worker. So the worker's going to lose their job or not be in a favorable position. And then you said, I would cut CEOs' wages and you would make it so that people had a fairer wage. And yeah, that's great. But your shareholders and people around you are going to realize your company is now no longer making the profit it once was because they haven't maximized their profit off the labor. They're not making the most profit out of their commodity, in this case being labor. So you're not going to be the CEO because they're not going to want a policymaker who's not making as much profit as someone else. It's the same sort of situation as with the government. because you know.
I want to ask you a question.
Hang on, I need to address this point because it just came back to me when you pointed out with private land and someone doesn't need to own it. Something going back to what you said on that. There is absolutely no, because you say communism and socialism is a stateless society, which I'm just going to say that's inherently untrue, considering that in order to revoke that private land, in order to take it away. So if I owned a huge piece of farmland and I was not harming anybody by owning that land, and you say, all right, guys, we're going to overthrow this guy. We're going to topple him like Bush did to Saddam Hussein. We're going to remove him. You are no different from a government. There's literally no difference between you and your group and the state. When the U.S. government toppled Saddam Hussein, you guys are are no different from them in that sense. When you are acting like a state.
How are you enforcing this massive piece of land then? Like what? If you've got...
How would one enforce it?
Yeah, how do you stake your claim over the land?
Well, simply put, when it comes to
his own self-defense.
Yeah, and
you're one person. How are you gonna imagine you've got like a massive hill and you've got all this like acres of forest land and woodland just stretching out as far as the eye can see, and weaver workers say no, this isn't fair. We want the land for people back, and you say, oh well, you're encroaching on my property, and they say, okay, yeah, we are. What are you going to do to stop them unless you've got people like working for you? But then how are you enforcing this like massive complex of land?
You get the state involved. You call the cops. They're like, hey, I got trespassers trespassing my property. Get it off.
Ham.
I thought we were talking about if it's already a socialist society. Like I'm asking, how is this example even like existing? Because you've said that you own this massive amount of land and the workers want to kick you off, right? But the workers, like, how are you going to defend this like massive swath of land unless you're paying someone? Which you wouldn't be doing because everyone already has what they need in society, and no one there's no concept of bettering yourself and having more capital because you've abolished that concept.
All right, so I'll answer that. Okay, so how you would enforce it is with simply put, and I know this might sound a bit crass to say, but simply put, you'd enforce it by having your own 357 Magnum. So when someone does trespass on your property, anybody, and I will point out that with private property, like the analogy, like you're like, this wouldn't happen in a socialist society. Well, this is just if we transition from capitalism to socialism. So let's say on January 24th, 2018, at effectively noon, capitalism's dead and socialism is now the counterculture. And let's say me and Zach own our own private land, and you and the leftists on Twitter, we're going to overthrow us. Are no different from the state. The point I'm making is that you guys say it's a stateless society. You are acting as if you guys are the state. But there's no difference between.
I want to say something. Like if we say, for example, me and S-Man were to claim ownership over a piece of land, it doesn't matter if you have it through mob rule or through the government. It is a tyrannical infringement on us to own that piece of land.
But it's not though. It's reclaiming the land.
No, it is.
Anyway, to go back to what you were saying, S-Man. Yeah, you've got a gun, yeah, and you could be an amazing gunman. But you're one person, and you said yourself you've got a massive piece of land. How are you going to stop a group of workers, a sizable group of workers, coming and saying no, it's not fair for you to own just massive amounts of land for no reason?
They tend to march
in. What are you doing with it? Like, what are you doing with you don't need hills worth of land, do you?
That honestly is, I will say, there's a lot of things people don't need, but they have anyway. We don't necessarily need computers, but we have them, don't we? And I will simply point out with what, to answer your question, like I would use that gun to defend the land. And if you are
how?
What do you mean how? Like
surely you know about realisticness of guns and stuff. You're not going to be like running in like commando style, like shooting off the workers. If you've got one pistol and they've all got there's loads of them, yeah.
Oh wait. There's a question you asked me and I failed to answer beforehand. It was about if pure capitalism. If companies were trying to harm us, like let's say they were acting as if a government, like this territory of Nike, which you pronounce Nike, that's Nike, but semantics aside, we would be armed to the teeth. I'm not an ANCAP, by the way. I'm not humane, but we'd be armed to the teeth. And going back to what you said, what would I do with the gun? Well, if someone is trespassing on my property, essentially they would get, and I hate to use War Corps language, but it's too tempting at this point. They would have the same fate as John F. Kennedy. And I would also like to point out that with the land, like I'll say that it is legitimately owned because you purchased it. Like legally speaking, it is legitimate. And at what point, and it is true, you are acting like the state. The state, for instance, and I make the analogy, when the United States toppled Saddam Hussein, you guys are like the United States and the UK when they toppled Saddam Hussein, except, and I don't see the huge issue with, like, I'm not saying be armed, like, oh, just with a gun. You could put any other weapon in there. You could put, like, I don't know, some type of rifle, like a sniper rifle, for instance. It's legal in some states, or an AR-15. So, and communists tend to walk in groups, and I'm not, like, I'm just saying that they tend to walk in groups. So if someone were an excellent marksman, oh well.
Yeah, say for example, S-Man was say for example that S-Man was going to gather a posse of gunmen. Like I would join him, JJ, Baphomet, and whoever else, humane mind, and get a whole group of people defending that piece of land. They all have a share over that piece of land, defending it from the mob of the socialists who want to take that piece of land.
Yes.
So the mob is defending another mob of just one person. But what if that mob that defended the land successfully wants to take over that one person who owns the land? Yeah. What about them?
Why is the mob working for you, S-Man? We're in a post-capitalist society in this example.
They have the choice.
You guys see why a stateless society is such a huge fucking problem?
May I answer?
You have.
He got muted, so go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
You have problems literally being solved by who has the most guns.
No, but right.
I'm not for a stateless society. I just need to get that out. Owen, go ahead.
Right. So, you said like a marksman, or if you and a few other people were doing it. But the whole point of this example was to say, in a socialist society, this would happen, and thus socialism would have to have a state. Firstly, you're not going to have people who you've hired to defend your land, because you've no longer got the need to work for gaining more capital. You don't have that whole system of profiting off commodities and stuff. So you don't have the people aren't going to work for you to defend the land. Like, that's not going to happen. I mean, yeah, fine, maybe Zach will come and join you and you'll have guns together just to fight the commies, but that's not what's that going to do. Like, what is going on?
I have a question
for you. You can, I'll ask it in a second. Hold on.
What you're asking me, what would we do? We're just defending the land, and if we have to, we'll fire a few warning shots.
What's going to happen? Like, you're two people against the rest of society. But anyway, more importantly,
thanks, Baphomet. Good.
The idea that land, you're not going to need all these hills and hills of land. So essentially, you're fighting a lost cause from the start to defend land for no other reason than you want to spike the communists. Like, no one's going to sign up for that, regardless of what these people say. Like, it's pointless. Just dedicating your life to defending some hills just because you want to, prove that socialism is bad for some reason.
Well,
it's nonsense. No one's going to be doing that. But secondly, you said, the land was bought, and therefore it's legitimate.
Are you going to
that's not a good argument to have, because you can't just say, it's in the law, so it's legitimate, because slavery was legal and that was legitimate. The war on drugs is legal, so is that legitimate? Like, you could just go on and on to point out where the law has clearly failed to deliver justice.
All right, and
that's the thing. And then finally, you said, actually, two more things. You said, not what if it was Nike in a capitalist situation defending
with the armed?
But under capitalism, it's different, because you have that system of selling commodities to make profit for yourself and selling stuff. So, for instance, selling your labor to make commodities. So you would have people who would gladly defend Nike's property, as they do, and as you see in factories in the third world and stuff, and in the first as well, because they've got that incentive of being paid to do it. they've got that, you will defend us, but we can defend you because you're being paid and stuff. Under a different system, there'd be no point just marching around for no reason, defending a hill just to fight some left-wingers. So no one would do it with you. And it's pointless. Like, what are you using this land for? Just to spite people. But then finally, you said you're acting like the state if you remove people from their land. Firstly, it's not their land, as we've already said. But secondly, I don't see that as a entirely pertinent analysis point, even, because you could say, oh, if you have a flag, you're like the state because states have flags. It's like it's the same thing as that. Then yeah, technically the workers are enforcing their way upon the person who's decided their land for themselves. But the initial point was that the person who decided all this land belonged to them enforced it in the first place. And in reality, in this society that socialists envision, the only people who'd have anything to worry about with this sort of thing happening is someone who owns an entire island, or someone who, like you said, owns a massive sprawling complex of land, as far as I could see. If you've got a house, no one's going to be showing up and be like, yeah, this is our house now. That's ridiculous. That's not the point of socialism. It's to reclaim land from the ownership of a few landlords. So, for instance, in several cities in the UK, half the housing agencies are owned by the same people. You have 5 or 6 letting companies in complete control of the entire city, basically. That's what people want to change. They want people to be able to have their own house and their own home without having to fear the having to pay a landlord to live on it. That's the whole point. It's not about making everyone subject to the state. There is no state. You're free to do what you want as long as you don't impose on other people. That's the whole point. Anyway, I'll let you go in.
Okay, so
I have a question for Owen. You say this as if it's an obvious thing, but you've yet to demonstrate why it is. Why is me being able to sell my labor to a business to allow them to profit off of it? It's mutually beneficial. I'm able to afford my house, my car, my electronics, and they're able to not only pay for all the costs, but also make a profit and live off of that. Why is that a problem?
Do you think it's fair for you to be able to afford your standard of living, despite your boss, and then your boss is able to make much more than you, have a much nicer house, have a really more comfortable standard of
boss
living?
works harder.
Hey, Owen, we aren't as jealous as you are about other people's standards of living.
Hey, I hadn't finished. Hey,
Zach, shut the fuck up.
Hey, I hadn't finished responding to Ham.
Go ahead, Owen.
Like I was saying, you did labor, yet your boss has a mansion and you are renting your house to someone else. I mean, I don't know what your housing situation is, but I take it you're not a boss. Regardless, the situation is that despite the boss needing your labor to have his style of life, it's you who's facing the negative whilst your boss profits. And yeah, you could say, oh, I can afford my house, I can afford to eat. That's not the situation for a lot of people under capitalism. Lots of people have to rely on food stamps. If that, lots of people don't have a home. Lots of people can't know if they get ill, they could die because they can't afford their home if they pay for healthcare. You ignore
which is why we have a social safety net.
Yeah, and it's rubbish. Have you seen the state of benefits and the minimum wage, which is lower than the living wage, for instance? The fact that so many people end up not having meals because they need to be able to pay their rent. All around you is the problems that capitalism creates, and you're essentially glossing over it to pretend as though the society is fine. I'm not trying to have a what's it called?
But so far, all you've demonstrated is we have a whole bunch of policy issues that I agree that we need to fix, like a better social safety net, Medicare for all, and etc. But you've not demonstrated why me selling my labor for my boss to profit off of is bad, is morally wrong.
Okay,
well, like I said, I'm asking you, is it fair for you to do work and then your boss to take the credit for it, essentially, and hand you a bit of your own late produce back?
Actually, hang on
I
a
say
second.
it's more than fair.
Hang on.
Well,
Guys,
After this, I want to talk to Owen quickly about right to discriminate. Actually, if we could cut to that, because you and I do appear to disagree on that, and I actually want to get your reason.
I could give a fuck less about the right to discriminate. The question I'm asking.
No.
yeah, thank God.
I'm just trying to get Owen's position on this, because I feel like every time we have a discussion, like, we just agree to disagree afterwards, and we don't argue about it ever again. So, to spare your guys' Twitter feed. Okay, so Owen, you say you don't, you've not necessarily, God, you've stated that, and I've given you my answer in the Twitter chat about the right to discriminate, how we deal with bigots. What would you say in response to the answer I'd given you? Let me go back to the Twitter chat to find it. But it was in the Twitter chat I mentioned, because you and Ham appear to agree that about there should not be a right to discriminate. So, what would you?
I hard to say we agree.
Ham thinks the government should force someone to bake. For instance, a Christian baker should be forced to bake a gay person a cake.
Yeah, you're not being forced. Jesus fucking Christ.
Exactly. Like, there's no.
Well, technically, you are.
No.
Ham, shut your fucking mouth. I'm trying to get someone else's opinion on this. My God.
To be fair, I have spoken for like half the time, so I don't mind if
I'm just like I heard Ham's stance on this before. I'm just because I'm trying to get your own original.
And you're stating it wrong.
Well, okay, my apologies then. Just okay. So I've given you an answer to your question about the right to discriminate, Owen, and what I said was we should let the bigots expose themselves, and we boycott them.
That's not the case, though, is it? Because you look at what wealthy people in charge of corporations think and what they do and their policies, like what their ideas to themselves, and there's no real like stance to be able to deal with them. Because like if you're, for instance, the CEO of McDonald's and you're saying bigoted like rubbish, what's anyone going to be able to do if they say, oh, let the market decide? Like, no one's going to just stop consuming from McDonald's just because of that. I mean, yeah, you could say you'll personally stop, but you're one person, and ultimately to a billionaire, like losing the $5 you spent on a meal at McDonald's, if that isn't really going to have much of an effect. And what's more, it's certainly in America where you've got these massive monopolies in charge. If you say, I don't want to participate at your shop, I don't want to spend money on you, you're suddenly being cut out entirely, because it turns out a lot of people with the same opinions own most of the companies. It's like with television, where you've got 5 massive corporations who pretty much own the entire television industry. I think it's 5, in fact. Like, and if one of them says something rubbish and you want to avoid them, suddenly you've lost 20% of the market, and potentially more if more of the same people have the same like bigoted views. So the idea that you can just let a free market decide, you can let a free market punish bigots, is very misleading, because unless they're like a tiny local business and most people who use them happen to think their bigotry is bad, that's not going to happen. So yeah, maybe you're going to affect like Joe the baker who thinks that black people should be hung and stuff. But if it's a more larger scale company, then that's not going to work, and you need more punishment for bigotry. And perhaps more importantly, bigotry is wrong. We should be opposed to bigotry, and we shouldn't be making excuses saying, "Oh, if we leave it to chance, then maybe something will change."
All right, so here's how I'll respond to that. So going back to what you said about we shouldn't stand for bigotry, I'll take this in reverse order. Simply put, the whole thing, and I would say, because I don't know how you would solve the problem except for, and I'm not trying to strawman or assume motive, but I literally see no solution to the thing other than using, I guess, governmental force. Which, by the way, the government and us as a society, we're like, the purpose of our existence isn't to make people into better people. It's not to make people stop saying stupid things like they think, oh, blacks are like monkeys or something like that. As fucked up as that is, our purpose is not to correct people's bigotry. And my point about letting the bigots expose themselves is so individual people can say, you know what, I don't stand for if McDonald's refused to serve gay people or whatever. And usually, even though this would apply to mom and pop shops that might say, oh, we don't want to serve gay people or whatever, you could apply this to other businesses where the point is people can refuse to go. It's not necessarily that enough people will do it in order for that business to change their mind. It's just you have other options to go. So if a baker or if some restaurant in the state of Kentucky were to say, hang on a second.
Some that I want to address as well about, say, my neighbor having more than me. Like, Owen McDonald keeps on pointing out unfair. Like, for example, Ham apparently has no problem with his boss having a bigger house than him or whatnot, as long as he himself can get along with in life as well. And then Owen responds, but is it fair? The thing is, Owen, people like us, we have absolutely no problem if our neighbor has a bigger house than us, has more food than us, has fancier clothing than us. That is not immoral if a person was to have more or have more higher quality goods than us. It's not immoral if, like, say my neighbor has like a lobster dinner, but I'm stuck with the simple cheeseburger. What is immoral is rape, murder, theft.
Yeah.
It is not immoral for people to be uneven in their standards of life.
And to point out something to go back on what you said about theft is refuse. Like when people say, because I think Zach said that by saying no to someone, you're not stealing from them when it comes to like how bosses are about. I can't remember the full context, but Zach was making a point about that in another stream. But what I was saying is you have the other options. You have the options like if McDonald's or if some business in Kentucky said something extremely racist to you, you could say that business is garbage. I am going somewhere else, and you could, I don't know, find some worker-owned vegan far left restaurant, and your heart will be forever rewarded, I guess. And essentially, I honestly see no entitlement, because it does seem like a lot of people feel entitled when a business says no. When a business owner says, no, I will not serve you, they have every right to do so because they're the one who owns the property. And before you give me the land's illegitimate, that's not the point. The point is just simply you have the right to say no. And at the end of the day, like I mentioned a minute ago, is like the point, like we're not, like my job isn't to try and make someone be less bigoted or whatever. If I want to challenge bigotry, I'll do it. I've done it before and I have no problem with it, but that's not necessarily my job. And I'm not going to tell someone whose land I don't own how to run it unless the person's actually physically harming someone. So if Zach owned a piece of land and he was hitting JJ in the face with a football helmet, I would intervene and stop that from happening. And breaks the law and actually harms somebody, then I honestly couldn't care less what you do on your private property, as long as you're not physically harming somebody or threatening to harm somebody. Go ahead. After this, I think you said you wanted to go. So after this, I think we'll just, I guess we could set it up properly another time, but yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, so I've got stuff written down here for S-Man and for Zach. So who do you want me to start with?
You can start with me, as this has become round 5 in a sense. Good.
Okay. So you said that you can't. I don't see a way you can end bigotry, and I don't think that's the sort of aim of anti.
That's not what I said.
You said you don't see a way you could eradicate bigotry completely, isn't it? That's sort of what you said.
Well, that's not our job. Is to eradicate it. And my method of eradicating it is to let people harm themselves financially. I mean, financially harm themselves.
Yes, but then that doesn't, that's leaving it to chance essentially, because you're hoping
really
the same view as you. But secondly, it's all very well to say, humans that have a direct purpose to end bigotry, but we should all surely be hoping to make the world better for people and hoping to make people happy. I don't think it's asking too much of people to sort of look out for your neighbor. And sort of be nice people, and subsequently we should be caring that individuals and entities in society are mistreating the people who aren't the same as them and stuff. And yeah, fine, no one's forcing you to do that, but you should hope people have the basic decency to oppose that. And that's sort of where people are coming from when they say, well, no, we don't stand for businesses saying, no, we're not serving gay people. Secondly, again, you said, just take your business elsewhere if they're bigoted. Well, like I said, again, it's all very well if it's like Papa Bob in some deep South like Republican hell. It's like, yeah, exactly. It's like it's alright if it's just like some tiny little business, but you know, if it's a larger thing, if it's someone who's not going to care whether one person is bigger than not, that doesn't work at all. And you talk about, it's their right to be a bigger. What about the person who has gone into a place, done nothing wrong, and then just been discriminated against just for, being gay or being black or being whatever?
I'll answer that. All right, I'll answer that right there.
I thought you wanted me to address Zach's point as well.
Okay, I'll quickly answer that, and then you can go to Zach's point. What, like, they've done nothing wrong? What about their right? They have no right to someone else's to whatever they're going out to buy, unless the financial transaction was made. At that point, the property, whatever you're buying, it goes from the person you bought it from to you, and you should not have any legal right to that. You should not be legally entitled to someone else's property.
But do you think that's flawed, though, isn't it? Because you're essentially saying that it's legally justified to be a bigot towards someone, but not to. Sure. That's flawed, isn't it? Well, so you care more about the well, then I guess we have a fundamental disagreement there, because it's disgraceful to the idea of someone being
people are not obligated to be nice people.
Yeah, okay.
Being nice and discriminating against people.
Yeah,
But then you also said, it's in the law, and again, I will tell you, the law is not adequate, and just because it's in the law doesn't mean it's justice, and justice is not dependent on the law. The actions of slavery, that was legal, that was well in the law, and it took an amendment to the law to change it, and not even fully. But anyway, going to what you said, Zach, you said murder is immoral, rape is immoral, but inequality and poverty, those things are bad as well. Those things are negative parts of society, and if you are a person that sorry. Well,
I'm not talking about poverty. I was mentioning examples like myself and Ham getting off well in life. If you want to talk about comparing a homeless person to a rich guy, that is a different animal. But we are comparing an average Joe who is getting by in life versus a rich guy. I just want to start off with that basis.
Okay, well, a rich person shouldn't exist. They shouldn't be extremely wealthy because they've needed the exploitation of the labor to get themselves rich. And
they don't need to, but it's not immoral.
Sorry?
Yeah, and it's not exploitative.
They stole.
How is it exploitative?
Because they stole the work of others to get themselves where they are. It's like, imagine if you wrote an essay and then someone else took it, said, "Oh, this is mine," because I paid you off for it, then got a degree off it and became like a billionaire. They're wealthy off your labor, yet without your essay, they wouldn't be where they are. It's the same thing. Without the work of every McDonald's worker, the person who's a billionaire because of McDonald's can't be a billionaire. Yet without the billionaire, the workers who did the work would have the produce and be able to have healthy, happy lives. And yeah, it's all very well, Ham, you saying, "Oh, well, I'm fine. I feel fine in my life. I don't care if my boss is a billionaire." Well, you live in a first world country. You're well off at the moment, and I don't know how wealthy you are, but times can change, and there may be a point where things aren't so comfortable for you. Certainly in my country, poverty is on the up because we're seeing capitalism begin to, as it always does, begin to start collapsing, begin to start economically not making that growth anymore, and so the wages of workers are stagnating as the cost of living goes up, which is obviously causing a lot of problems. And it needn't be a problem because the wealth that is owned by capitalist upper class is the value of the work that is done by laborers. And the final thing I wanted to say, Zach, is why do you keep referring to me as Owen McDonald every time? It seems so strange. Like, you wouldn't imagine if every time you spoke to someone, it's like, "Oh, hello, Zach Edwards," like every single time. Like, it's just so bizarre.
I think it's a force.
I want to make a response to what Owen said. You say that billionaire wouldn't be a billionaire because of the work of the laborers, but those laborers wouldn't have the income that they have if it weren't for that billionaire getting the capital, getting the ideas, getting the investment to go out on this business venture and risk, losing everything he owns.
Do you not see how that's circular though? Like he wouldn't have had
It's
wealth.
not circular.
It is circular. Because
it starts. It starts with
Owen, he's talking about the starting point of a business. He's talking about the starting point of a business, Owen.
Calm down.
Okay, stop muting me, yes, man.
Guys, calm down.
Shut your fucking mouth. I'm trying
Hey,
to.
you shut the fuck up. I'm trying to have a conversation here, and you're trying to.
I'm trying. Stop cutting people off. Okay. The only reason
you're the one who's cutting people off.
Right.
Okay. Let's relax. Okay. Everyone. Whatever. Like. I think we should just head to a wrap up anyway, or else we're gonna argue all night and like put like 357s in and up to our temple. So let's just
let's
just wrap it up.
What I was saying, if you like, they wouldn't have been able to start a business in the first place without the labor that they exploited in the first place. If you pay someone less than what their labor's worth, you've exploited them, and it doesn't matter. You started a business. Well, if society was fairer, not exploitative, they wouldn't have been requiring selling their labor to the business owner in the first place. So again, it's a circular argument. And to say that, they need the billionaire, it's a complete sham, because if it was fair, then the billions that boss has would be distributed amongst the workers who actually work for it. So essentially,
what should the boss earn?
There shouldn't be a boss. If there's a manager who's like overseeing the shift, then they can, earn part of the wealth, but not not profiting off the laborers who did it. Because if there weren't any workers, what would the manager be managing? Even with McDonald's, like the CEO, like they don't do anything. It's not the CEO who's doing that paperwork. It's their team underneath them. You'd be surprised how little the average boss actually does compared to the people underneath them that they're profiting off.
And that's just minor problems with our corporatist system.
It's not minor at all, bro. It's the whole point. It's profiting off commodities is the whole problem, and that's integral to capitalism.
You still haven't explained why, a business owner profiting off of a laborer's labor is a bad thing.
Because it's taking someone else's work and getting the credit for it.
It's not theft, though.
But that worker agreed to do that.
Yeah, but if they didn't agree to
if the worker wants to earn more money, he can ask for a raise.
And he won't get it. I mean, surely you know.
Yes, he will.
Do you think you can just ask your boss for a raise and we just say yes?
Well, they have the right
to do that. I can't do that. I know for sure I can't do that. There's not enough money in the company to do that at my place.
Owen, theft is permanently depriving someone of something. But I need to bring this up where you'll constantly call something theft, and I'll point out to you how it's not. For instance, if I were to steal your computer and I permanently deprive you of it, that is theft. If I simply rip a video from your channel and repost it as my own, that is obviously not theft. You're like, it's something intangible. So when you're stealing someone's supposed labor hours, like that's something that isn't tangible. It's not theft. But like it's besides like it's not theft just to supposedly steal someone's hours or whatever.
Yes, the idea is that the worth of the labor has been stolen from the workers who did the labor. So,
it's not tangible though.
It doesn't matter.
Why does that matter?
Actually, it does matter. It's not theft. You constantly say it is theft. The point is, it's not tangible. You can't steal something that's not tangible. Like,
what do you mean by tangible?
Something you can actually grab. Like, obviously, I could steal Zach's flag. Yeah, like I could steal Zach's flag, and obviously that is theft. Me wasting your time or wasting your value, that isn't theft.
So you can't touch money. Money's not real.
That's
money is a social construct.
What the fuck?
Money is a social construct in a way, so we just like imagine the worth of money.
It's
let's be honest, money couldn't exist in a socialist system.
Sorry?
Oh god.
Money can't exist in a socialist system.
That's not what I was saying. And what I said that if you're like if there's a value that's been produced, right, and workers have contributed to that value and are responsible for that value, and then the boss says, right, I'm taking 90% of this and 10% can go down to the rest of you, and that is stealing. That's theft. The boss who did nothing didn't.
So your problem is the amount that they're profiting off of.
It's also not
theft. So if it was more fair
at a time, like I'm saying that theft is like it's actually taking you refusing this. I think this is the context Zach was saying. Someone refusing to do something isn't theft.
But
obviously,
yes, but it is still force, isn't it? Because if you decide not to work for this corporation, which yeah, fine, you're free to do that. But then you've got no income and your quality of life plummets, and you're gonna like either starve or live off non-survival benefits. So every worker is faced with the situation of essentially not being able to earn their labour's work. They don't get a fair wage, so they accept the conditions or they starve. And obviously, if the other choice is like dying, then anyone's gonna choose the exploitative wages. And ask your boss for a raise. Your boss is never gonna give you your labour's worth. They're never gonna give you close to your labour's worth because then they can't make any profit, which is the whole problem.
How do you determine the worth?
Well, that's not the problem. That's how the system can actually function. If the business owner cannot make a profit, they can't pay their bills.
And Owen, I need to point this out really quickly. Is I'm totally fine with the option of starving or going to work. Like I have absolutely no problem with it because
the choice to leave or die.
To work or die, absolutely.
We're against laziness.
I grew up. Hang on a second. I grew up poor, right? I actually grew up poor, and it sucked. But it taught me that laziness isn't acceptable. So you can say, in my society they wouldn't work. Well, in my society, you can say, you know what, I'm not going to work. But in my society, you don't deserve support. If you want support, you have to show. You have to go out and earn it. Like if JJ decides, you know what, fuck this, I'm not going to work. You're wasting my time. So and you brought up in some of your videos where easily day off work and you get fired. If taking one day off from work is enough to get you fired, you are as an employee worthless. If you are more valuable as an employee, obviously you will not be fired. Like if I'm a waiter, right, and I don't go to work for one day and they fire me, anybody can be a waiter. It is not the most difficult job in the world. If I'm like a mechanic or something that's actually valuable, then obviously or something valuable, then I'm more then the likelihood of getting fired is significantly reduced. It's like if I have a degree in something useless, like I don't know, philosophy, that doesn't really get you any jobs out there in the real world. Gender studies, like shit like that, does not do anything. There are jobs that are the things they teach in school as well that are totally fucking useless. Sorry for the profanity, but like that where it's you get the idea I'm trying to get. And Lonely Wolf and you, I think, shared the same view on education, but that's go ahead.
Let's take this to like. Let's say if you're a person living on your own in the woods, there's no civilization around you. There is no option to just rely on someone else to to feed you. You have to work or you will die.
Yeah, but that's not realistic to society today, is it? Like you do.
There are people
which is why most functional societies institute some sort of social safety net.
But then that's not like fair, though, is it? Because those people who are on the social safety net, which it also includes lots of workers, funnily enough, because minimum wage is actually below the living wage. Those people are contributing labour, yet not getting back what they put in. They work, their boss gets rich, they stay in the same poverty-ridden position. But you said a lot of stuff here, S-Man, and some of it's frankly pretty awful. People are worthless if they don't work. People who are lazy should starve. Like that's terrifying.
Okay,
like you think that
I'm sorry, but I'm not trying to bring
it. That's how the world works.
Yeah, and I'm not.
Just because that's the world work doesn't mean that's the world the way that world has to work.
Guys. That's not the point.
Well, we can make it more fair. Yeah, let's change that. Let's make a better world.
Well, we do have an option for a better world. It's called a social safety net. It's called a mixed economy.
How is that?
We have those systems, and they work fantastically.
But can you not see that the social security systems and benefit systems, they're being cut massively? Look in the UK, benefits and the social programs that are there to help the poor, they're being cut because capitalism is making less profit, like it always eventually will do, because you can't infinitely grow, and thus the costs and the negatives are being put onto the working class to sustain the wealth of the wealthy. Your system that you advocate for isn't sustainable because social democracy is still capitalist, and naturally it will always value profit over human life. And you were going back to what you were saying, S-Man. People, like, I don't know how I can get you to understand that everyone deserves, like, a healthy life. You shouldn't have to work, and that's another thing as well. There aren't even enough jobs. Like, you keep talking about, everyone should have a job, everyone should be working, when there aren't enough jobs. Soon we're going to be in a situation where automation doesn't mean
Geeks!
Sorry, Geek's audio was turning to AIDS. I couldn't hear what you're saying. So,
and actually, like you're driving a motorcycle.
And I can actually address the point right now.
Sorry.
For instance, there are Americans who are so pathetic and lazy they refuse to take some fruit picking jobs in California and North Carolina where immigrants will do it. And honestly, the immigrants are a benefit to the economy, but that's besides the point. Those jobs they refuse to take. So those jobs are open and available. And from at least what I could read up upon the situation and find out, haven't been subject to automation yet. But honestly, and you said the view is it's horrid. You should either work or starve. You shouldn't expect society support when you haven't done anything to earn their support. And like I said, maybe my view is, well, I haven't said, but I'll just say this. Maybe my view is a little jaded. Maybe it's a little harsh. But, I mean, I don't know if you've ever grown up poor or something. I don't know. I guess you're middle class. You've said so at least. I mean,
I'm working class.
I'm close to homelessness twice in my lifetime thus far. And I hope that those are the only 2 times I ever have. It was during, in 2014. And overall, and it fucking sucked, man. It really did. And it made me value money. It made me value it so I won't waste it on bullshit I don't need. So when people are just rich just to buy things, even though they do put it back into the economy. So if you're this rich guy who for some reason needs to buy like 14 Porsches, you're putting the money you spend, which is a whole lot of money for a car that is very valuable, and you're putting it back in the economy. And simply, and a point that the wealth redistribution aspect of your socialism, again, you are, and this is a point I feel like is still correct in the sense of you are no different than a government by forcefully redistributing the wealth, which makes your anarcho-communist society an absolute oxymoron. And I'm sorry if I sound a little irritated or a little angry. That's not the case. It's just this chat has been a very interesting one, I'll say the least. But sorry, go ahead.
I really take issue with Owen constantly saying that capitalism is not sustainable, even though it has sustained itself for at least 300 years now. And every socialist society that has ever been has fallen within a person's lifetime.
Okay,
but sometimes even sooner than that.
You're wrong.
Okay, so this point about socialism has never been tried. Let me see if I can find an article. Like there was some.
S-Man, I thought you said you're wrapping up. Surely we're going to another topic now, or?
Actually, fair enough. But there was someone who did try and implement democratically socialist economic policies, and that was Hugo Chavez. But yeah, let's actually we need to wrap up. This is going to go on all night, so I'm just going to end it right here. So thank you, Owen, for joining me. I do appreciate having you on. Thank you to everyone who's listened. And before we start a screaming match, we can solve this in the Twitter chat so we don't continue this feud on here right now. So thank you to everyone who listened. And as always, right to discriminate is fine. Capitalism is not like the next Adolf Hitler. And I'll see y'all next time. Have a good night, everybody.